Let me tell you a little story. When it came out, it was down the block here, the movie, 2 blocks from here, in my neighborhood, right here where I live now. And I went there with my ex-wife, Vicky. And we went there, we watched the movie. And when I saw the movie, I was kind of depressed. I said, was I really like that? You know what she said to me? You were worse.
It was just a stunning film from the first day of dailies. You know, you were just sort of knocked off your feet by what was happening. The film is just sort of burned into the screen. It's got such intensity, such obviously very personal significance for Marty at that point in his life, and for De Niro, of course, just a magnificent performance. So brilliant camera work. I mean, it was quite something.
I think there's various elements to it that make it this kind of this great of modern cinema. In terms of creativity and filmmaking, you know, it's stunning. It's an unbelievable way of translating a story into a screen. It's especially second to none.
Raging Bull was, without doubt, one of the best films of the 80s, and it was given by the American critics the award for the best film of the 80s. But at the time when it came out, the reviews were very uneven.
People didn't really know what to make of it. I remember when we were in the laboratory trying to rush some prints out, and we read the first reviews in Variety and the Hollywood Reporter, and they were extremely bad, and they said they warned distributors not to book the film. I can tell you that was not a good day for us.
Nobody thought at the time that it was likely to be a classic. It runs counter to everything Hollywood now does. It's not a feel-good movie.
It's fascinating because you're forced to sympathize with someone who is hateful in every way. The kind of person you would never want anything to do with, or anyone you ever cared about to have anything to do with. You're forced to care about his circumstances and his decline.
It was the Lower East Side. It was the slums of Manhattan. It was the poor section, but I never realized I was poor. I had a lot of fun when I was a kid. Robbing, stealing, taking money, doing things like that. You know, the kid stuff. And I thought everybody was like that. I thought everybody was doing the same thing, because everybody was doing the same thing. Because Scorsese came from that neighborhood also. We knew exactly what it was all about.
Scorsese is comfortable with New York, and with New York people, and with the whole New York ambience. De Niro pushed Raging Bull because it was a wonderful part to undertake, a very, very difficult and challenging part. And at that stage in his career, that's exactly what he wanted.
He asked somebody to mail him a paperback in Sicily. He was doing Godfather 2. And he read the script there, and he was obsessed with the story, and he wanted to do it. And the dedication he put into this movie, I can't explain it. He was obsessed with the movie and everything, with me, with the people I was involved with.
Scorsese was very doubtful about making the film in the first place. I think he went through a very bad time personally, with a breakup of a marriage, and he had to be persuaded by De Niro to make the film. The disaster that his life was in persuaded him that the disaster of Jake LaMotta's life was actually worth filming.
In Scorsese's approach, he definitely wanted to make the boxing the kind of fundamental point, the hook around which this psychodrama spins. Scorsese was determined that the boxing was going to be real. Yeah, it was going to be absolutely what it's like to be in a ring. He wanted to put the audience in the ring with LaMotta. And one of the great unsung heroes of most of Scorsese's movies is Thelma Schoonmaker, who's an absolutely amazing editor. And she was cutting, immensely detailed sequences.
De Niro trained with me for 1 solid year before we shot one foot of film. And in that time, I boxed over 1,000 rounds with him. I'm not exaggerating at all, over 1,000 rounds. And when I got done training him, I'm very certain, I'm very positive he could have fought professional.
One of the things that Scorsese did when he was designing the film was to decide to make each fight different from the other in terms of style. So it would all depend on what the state of Jake LaMotta's mind was at the time that he was fighting the fight. Here, for example, you'll see that the ring is extremely wide and bright and free and open. And that's because this is the first fight where he knocked down Sugar Ray Robinson, who was a great fighter, a great champion, and LaMotta's great rival. To give you a stark contrast to that, a fight that LaMotta lost on a decision is done in a completely different way. Now, this is a fight, again, against Sugar Ray Robinson, but which LaMotta lost on a technicality, and he felt that he had fought a terrific fight. So he was extremely upset about the fact that he had lost. So Scorsese designed the entire fight as if it was in a pit of hell. Now you'll see here that every shot is shot through a camera lens that has flames beneath the camera, and these flames are causing a mirage-like rippling effect in the way the image looks, and lots of smoke, so that everything is kind of indistinct, unfocused, which is the way Jake LaMotta remembered the fight in his mind, because he didn't feel that he deserved to lose it. Begins with the camera descending into a dark, smoky ring. Every shot has this feeling of being not quite there. Sometimes the faces are out of frame. Here the referee is very blurred. When LaMotta goes back to his corner, I'll just run down to that. He goes back to his corner and sits down, you'll see that you can't even see his face. His face is obscured by the rope. Again, contributing to this feeling that he doesn't quite understand what's going on.
Robinson is down for the second time in his career. He was down in the last fight too.
One particular fight, I'm fighting another Frenchman by the name of Laurent Autuil, and with 23 seconds left of the 15th round, I could not win the fight.
LaMotta is taking terrible punishment on the ropes as Autuil bangs him with left and right to the head. Another left, another right to the jaw, and LaMotta turns around.
I knocked him down. They counted 10. There was 13 seconds left. I was very lucky to retain my title. Now, that particular fight, we have filmed it, the real fight. And Scorsese followed every punch the exact way I did it. I threw a wide left hook, the last punch, and hit him. He bounced off and went down.
And he wobbles into the rope and goes down.
And the way he bounced off the ring in the real fight, they had films of the real fight, and the way it happened in the real fight, it did the same thing on film. You couldn't tell the difference.
He'll never make it. 9, 10. It is all over. He is knocked out, and Jake LaMotta, with 13 seconds left to go in the final round, has made one of the most remarkable comebacks in all boxing history.
Marty had always seen the actual LaMotta fights with his father on television or in the theater in black and white. And actually, my husband, Michael Powell, was visiting at the time that De Niro was training. He wanted to see all the places where Mean Streets had been shot because he thought Mean Streets was a masterpiece, and he insisted that both Marty and Bob, who had become friends of his, that they show him where they had made the film. And while they were downtown, they decided to go to De Niro's the gym where he was training to become a fighter. And they were videotaping him because Marty was working out the choreography of the fights. They were looking at some videotapes, and Michael Powell said to Marty, "There's something wrong with the red gloves. It doesn't seem right." And Marty said, "You're right, the film should be in black and white."
The problem with using black and white is that it actually wrecks your box office prospects. And Scorsese took a great risk in using black and white. But I must tell you that when I first saw the film and I came out and somebody said to me, "Amazing that it's in black and white," I hadn't realized it.
It was hard to learn how to shoot in black and white. The cameraman had to learn how to light in black and white, where you need to create much more depth in the room. You have to light very differently to create levels, where color does that for you automatically. And then Marty decided, of course, that the home movies would be the only thing in color, aside from the Raging Bull in red over the main title. He wanted the home movies to reflect as much as possible Jake LaMotta's own home movies, which were done in 16mm color. And then we desaturated the color so it would look as if they'd faded over time. You know, he often designs the entire soundtrack for our movies. Sometimes we hire a composer like Elmer Bernstein or Philip Glass. With Goodfellas, Raging Bull, and Casino, Marty devises the score himself from music that he's heard all his life and weaves into a tapestry. With Raging Bull, he knew that he wanted to use the music of Mascagni, a great Italian composer that he had heard all his life when he was growing up, through the tenement windows and being played at home by his family, and use that as the theme for Jake's suffering in the movie. It's got a very sad sound to it, very beautiful music. Marty had storyboarded the entire fight with incredible number of shots. He shot a great deal of footage for this very key fight. And however, we found that when we were structuring the fight, the key thing was where his wife picks up her head and looks at the devastation going on, and where she puts her head down again. And that actually became sort of the linchpin for how we built the entire final montage of destruction. Frank Warner, our great sound effects editor, one of the things he taught on this film entirely was how to use silence. Just a little bit of sound effect here. Very, very artificial. And back up now.
Robinson hurting LaMotta. He's hurting him now.
Taking the sound away, just a very, very slight rumble of some sort. The sound of an animal breathing, which he synced to Sugar Ray's breathing, probably a tiger or a lion. Now, this entire sequence, which is a blazing montage of cuts, was very, very carefully thought out by Marty and storyboarded. And when I was putting it together at first, I had to actually use the storyboards to guide me for exactly what he wanted. Then as we worked on it, we found that sometimes it made it more effective if we moved a shot later. To get the effect of this shot, for example, this shot of Bob's legs, Bob had his trainer on top of his shoulders, moving around to give him the feeling, give his legs the feeling of rocking like that. De Niro was incredibly patient during the shooting. You know, he would say to Marty, "What happens now?" And Marty would say, "Well, you're going to get hit in the left temple." And then then they would do that for 15 minutes. And he would say, "What's going to happen now?" She'd say, "We're going to get hit in the right temple." And he was so devoted. It was amazing. There was no fist in the glove that was actually hitting him, but he was having to snap his head over endlessly in all different kinds of speeds.
Hey, Ray. Never went down, Ray. You never got me down, Ray. You hear me? Never got me down. Yeah? See, look.
I know he tried to psychoanalyze me, and he did a great job because he asked me a million questions. He asked me how I did this and how I did that. And when I retired, I started to smoke cigars, and he wanted to know what kind of cigars I smoke. I said, what the heck's the difference? I said, smoke any brand. He said, no, I want to smoke the type of cigar you're smoking.
Though I'd rather hear you cheer when I delve into Shakespeare. A horse, my kingdom for a horse. I haven't had a winner in 6 months.
Met my wife, ex-wife, Vicky, the main one that a lot of people know about her.
Who's that girl over there?
Which one, the one I was talking about? Yeah. The blonde? Yeah. Vicky.
Where's she from?
She's from the neighborhood. She's a neighborhood girl.
He had an interview with Vicky at her home. And he spent the night there on a couch. I said, you spent the night there on a couch, and what happened? He said, no, nothing happened. He was scared. He thought, but that's a long time ago.
What's her last name? Vicky, that's all I know. Oh, Vicky. She knows them. She knows them, they know her. She comes to the pool every day, and everybody knows each other. You know how that shit works.
She go with them?
Don't go with nobody. She's 15 years old. Where the fuck's she gonna go? You gonna take her to Copacabana?
Great thing about Joe Pesci and De Niro is that they have a wonderful relationship and work extremely well together when they improvise. And inevitably, in their improvisations, even when they're shouting at each other, as they are in Casino, or particularly here where everything is very quiet and muted and filled with terror, humor will pop out in the improvisation. Marty loved the comic teams of Abbott and Costello, Bob Hope and Bing Crosby, and when we're in the editing room, we're often quoting from those films.
Don't shake that, Jack. Don't shake it like that, I'm telling you. It's the worst thing you could do.
One of the things that was so great watching this sequence be made is that De Niro was very, very generous towards Pesci's performance. He would keep feeding him lines from off camera when the camera was not on him, but he was helping Pesci find his performance. He was incredibly generous, starting over and over and over again with improvisations. He and Marty sort of had a little eye signal, and they would look at each other, and De Niro would know that Marty wanted him to do it again.
Over your own way. Where'd you go?
I went out, went shopping. It's my sister's, you know.
Now this very meaningful pan back. Very beautiful, that hold on the stairway as she goes up. Later in the scene, we're going to see him go up there and confront her, and it's almost as if it's a precursor of what's going to happen. Now, shooting in medium shots. Now here, do you see how he allows his stomach to...
Jack, I can't see nothing with your stomach in the way now. What are you giving me dirty looks for? Supposed to be a champion, eat like there's no tomorrow. That's...
you know, I don't know there are many actors who would allow themselves to be photographed this way. Of course, De Niro spent a great deal of time gaining weight in various stages during the film.
Look at that, 168 pounds. Stop eating.
It's unbelievable dedication. I mean, the man boxed over 1,000 rounds. Then he takes off 4 months out of the movie to put on 60 pounds. I mean, if that's not dedication, what is it?
Now here's where you see how he's just become Jake LaMotta in the way he handles every part of his body.
Excuse me, what do you mean by you, though?
Down to the breathing.
So? What does that mean? Don't mean
but
nothing.
even you don't even know what you meant by you.
Don't mean nothing.
Joey, that meant something. You mentioned Tommy, you mentioned Salvi, you mentioned you. You included you with them. You could have said anybody, but you said you and them.
You really let this girl ruin your life. Look at you. She really did some job on you. You know how fucking nuts you are? Look what she did to you.
You fucked my wife.
What?
You fucked my wife.
That's a very key moment. And in fact, what Marty decided to do, they'd done the improvisation so many times, is that he told Bob to say mother instead of wife to get a shocked reaction from Pesci, which actually worked, and we used it.
How could you ask me a question like that? How could you ask me? I'm your brother. You ask me that? Where do you get your balls big enough to ask me that?
Here's absolutely Jake LaMotta.
Just tell me.
The thing about the improvisations is that the actors know they have to begin and end at a certain place for us to make the scene work. But within certain areas, they are allowed to improvise. And of course, all this funny language that Joe Pesci was coming up with here about how De Niro should stop eating and do other things was all improvisation.
I'm not answering it. I'm not going to answer that.
This is one of the key improvised lines.
You're very smart, Joey.
You give me all these answers, but you ain't give me the right answer. I'll ask you again. Did you or did you not?
I'm not gonna answer. It's a sick question. You're a sick fuck, and I'm not that sick that I'm gonna answer it. I'm not telling you anything. I'm gonna leave. If Lenore calls, tell her I went home. I'm not staying in this nut house with you. You're a sick bastard. I feel sorry for you. I really do. You know what you should do? Try a little more fucking, a little less eating. You won't have troubles upstairs in your bedroom, and you won't pick it out on me and everybody else. You understand, you fucking wacko? You're cracking up.
That's a great improvised line from Joe Pesci.
Fucking screwball you.
Now again, watch the terrifying dread of this pan back. Look at this. The way he's dressed. Total lack of vanity. Now he'll go up to confront his wife.
Funny feeling watching yourself up there. You got to go through it to realize it. Because there were a lot of things up there that I didn't like. But that's many years ago, and Aubrey was doing these things at that time. I didn't realize it. Definitely changed. It's a big difference. You could ask my fiance, Denise. She could tell you. What do you think? What do you think? Have I changed?
You're mellow.
I mellowed? I hope I did.
The fact that Raging Bull only got 2 Oscars, and very deserved Oscars. Certainly Thelma deserved her Oscar, and De Niro deserved his, is par for the course. The fact that Scorsese's never got an Oscar is really a compliment to him more than anything else, although I don't think he'd think that, because he's not a Hollywood director. He once said to me, I'm not a Hollywood director, I'm an in spite of Hollywood director, and that absolutely sums him up. He's not Oscar material. He's much too emotional as a filmmaker, much too dangerous as a filmmaker for Hollywood. And I think when he gets an Oscar, it'll probably be a career Oscar, which is a kind of a pat on the back for being a good boy, and he's not really a good boy.
I feel that Oscar is not mine. I feel that Oscar is Marty's, because the dazzling visual nature of the fights is what that Oscar was for. And that's all Marty. You know, he designed and thought through every shot, every camera move, heavily directed the editing. So I really feel it was his. And of course it was quite devastating for me when he lost Best Director that night. De Niro won and I won, but for me it was always very tinged by deep disappointment that Marty didn't win. For a film like that, it's just unthinkable, really.
Just the kind of reputation grew and grew until finally one of these great kind of critics rounds up of the greatest films ever made. Raging Bull is frequently in the top 10, if not the top 5. It's seen as Scorsese's favourite film, or the greatest Scorsese film.
I think people are beginning to reclaim Raging Bull as part of the mainstream of 70s filmmaking rather than as necessarily the beginning of 80s filmmaking. I think that's the way it's being thought of now as part of this spectacular flowering of American cinema and as a sort of last great achievement of it.
Legitimately, and nobody could take that away from me, nobody. Some people aren't that lucky. Like the one that Marlon Brando played in On the Waterfront, an up-and-comer who's now a down-and-outer. You remember that scene in the back of the car with his brother Charlie, a small-time racket guy, and it went something like this. It wasn't him, Charlie, it was you. You remember that night at the Garden, you came down my dressing room and you said, kid, this ain't your night. We're going for the price on Wilson.
Do you remember that night, Charlie? This ain't my night. My night. I could have taken Wilson apart that night, so what happens? He gets an outdoor shot in the ballpark, and what do I get? A one-way ticket to Palookaville.
I was never no good after that night, Charlie. It was like a peak you reach, and then it's downhill. It was you, Charlie. You was my brother. You should have looked out for me a little bit. You should have looked out for me just a little bit. You should have taken care of me just a little bit.
Instead of making me take them dives for the short end money. I could have had class. I could have been a contender. I could have been somebody. Instead of a bum, which is what I am. It was you, Charlie.
Go get him, champ. I'm the boss, I'm the boss, I'm the boss, I'm the boss, I'm the boss.